The conference has not been started by the conference leader. Please remain on the line. The conference has not been started by the conference leader. Please remain on the line. The conference has not been started by the conference leader. Please remain on the line. The conference has not been started by the conference leader. Please remain on the line. The conference has not been started by the conference leader. Please remain on the line. The conference has not been started by the conference leader. Please remain on the line. The conference has not been started by the conference leader. Please remain on the line. The conference has not been started by the conference leader. Please remain on the line.
The conference will now begin.
Welcome to today's Paperclip Communications webinar. Today's presentation may not be reproduced without permission from Paperclip Communications and its presenters. This webinar and all materials provided during the presentation may not be altered. This presentation is not intended as legal advice and should be considered general information only. The answers to legal questions generally hinge upon the specific facts and circumstances of an institution. Individuals with specific questions should contact their institution's legal counsel. Please note, if you have not yet done the compatibility update as indicated on the login website for this webinar, you may experience sound issues. Please do it now to help eliminate experiencing sound issues as a result of streaming. You will need to log out of the webinar and then log back in. At this time, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, George Brailsford.
Thank you, Ellen. Hello, everyone, and as Ellen said, I'm Dr. George Brailsford, and on behalf of Paperclip Communications, I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for today's webinar entitled Declining Enrollment and Its Implications on Your Strategic Planning and Realistic Revenue Stream. Please note that audio streaming is available for today's webinar. However, telephone lines offer the most reliable sound quality during our webinar. See the fourth bullet under Important Notes on the instruction sheet you received for directions on calling in via the telephone. Before we get started, let me give you 3 things you need to know. First, we will have a Q&A session following the presentation. But take a look at the chat bubble in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Click on this icon and feel free to write a question or comment at any time during our presentation. I will make every effort to get to all the written questions during our Q&A session today, and I will give instructions on how to ask a live question when it is time. Today's presentation PowerPoint, and handouts are available. You can download them now by clicking on the Handouts tab and either saving or printing the materials. And finally, we've established a hashtag for today's webinar, and we invite you to tweet any thoughts you have during our time together today. As you can see, the hashtag is papercliptopic. To begin our webcast, I would like to introduce our expert presenter, who has graciously agreed to contribute his professional experience and wisdom with us today. Kent Barnes is the Executive Vice President and Vice President of Enrollment Communications and Planning at Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois. Welcome, Kent.
Thank you very much, George. I appreciate that gracious introduction, and I look forward to spending time with the participants for this webcast. This is a complex and important topic, and I have a couple of different objectives to try to undertake in our time together. I want to first give you a little bit more of my background to set up the level of experience that I have in contemplating this particular topic. Then I'd like to talk a little bit about the trends that are impacting enrollment and therefore the revenue generation on our campuses. And I'd like to then go into a section related to the implications of these trends and what they mean on our campuses. And then ultimately I'd like to provide some suggestions or some ideas or recommendations that you might consider on your campus as you contemplate the challenges ahead as we look at declining enrollment across many sectors of higher education and therefore the revenue associated with that as well. So I'm looking forward to this discussion, and I do want to echo George's invitation for you to contribute any questions that you might have throughout the presentation. I'm happy to take those questions throughout rather than wait until the end as you see fit. So thanks again for joining me. I want to give you a little bit more of my background. As George mentioned, I do serve as Executive Vice President as well as Vice President for Enrollment Communication and Planning at Augustana College. We are a private institution of 2,500 students. This is my 25th year in higher education, and I have worked in very competitive marketplaces both in the Middle Atlantic states and now in the Midwest. I've worked for undergraduate tuition-driven institutions, and the conversation that we're going to have today is central to my role. I will say, since we're among friends, that sometimes I look at students as revenue-generating units because of the pressures to ensure that we are doing the things from a strategic planning process and strategic planning vantage point that ensure that we have the revenues to continue to feed the beast, to ensure that our programs and institutions remain strong. My direct supervision at Augustana includes admissions and financial assistance as well as communications and marketing, and then I have special responsibilities for strategic planning as well as campus master planning. The strategic planning function, while at Augustana, I've been involved in 3 different strategic planning efforts and 2 at my previous institution, Elizabethtown College in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. So again, these questions that we're going to discuss today, or the environment that we're going to discuss, is certainly in the forefront of my mind. So what I'd like to do to begin is I'd like to talk a little bit about the trends that we face and how this informs and should inform each one of our campuses as we contemplate our own challenges and the challenges that we face as an institution. Because each institution is different. Each institution has its own various challenges, operates in its own market and marketplace, and will have to find its own solutions. But what I hope to do is introduce you to some ideas that might inform the solutions that you develop on your campus. So let's start with this, some fancy pictures. And I share this slide because I so frequently am reminded about the popular media's portrayal of higher education. There seems to be this sense, and of course the age-old focus on the climbing walls, or the luxurious pools outside of residence halls, or fitness centers adjacent to where students live. There is this impression that the media provides, and that unfortunately many of our families have started to also socialize, is that colleges and universities are flush with cash, and they're spending like drunken sailors in order to keep up with the Joneses. So this is sort of the image that some have relative to what's happening in higher education, but those of us who work in higher ed recognize that the pressure is incredible right now, particularly as it relates to enrollment and revenue. So what are the realities if these depictions of luxurious pools and climbing walls and fitness centers are not our reality? Well, here are some headlines that maybe more effectively represent the truth of the marketplace and inform our ability to rise to the challenges that we face. You see a couple of headlines right here about colleges that are specialized with history only, or Pennsylvania considers a no-frills, lower tuition college, or the whole idea of a 3-year degree in order to save undergrads time and money. I guess what I would position some of these headlines to be is the further commodification of higher education. There is this perception that cheap and fast is the way to go for higher education. So we're really presented with this challenge of combating this atmosphere and this sense that college and a college education should be cheap and fast. So how do we go about that? What has that impact of these sort of truthful statements been upon the market? Well, here are some truths that we all have to come to terms with as we think about facing the challenges ahead in strategic planning and ensuring that we have sufficient revenue to continue to feed the beast on our campus. Well, truth number one, and no matter what source you identify, suggests that college enrollment is falling. Particularly, you can see this for the 4-year for-profit and the 2-year public institutions. But you see in the left-hand portion of your slide that across all sectors there's been a decline in enrollment. This is the challenge that we face today. If you look at this slide, you can get a better sense by the actual volume and the numbers by sector and how enrollment is falling. Part of this has to do with college participation rates, and you can look at this by ethnicity and see that in so many respects we've either flatlined or the volume within a particular population is not moving the needle sufficiently to continue to have institutions grow enrollment. This is an interesting graphic which I think reinforces this truth and this reality that enrollment is falling across our country. But there's some nuance to this graphic as well. So there are more than 750,000 fewer students in college, but you can see that the two sectors that are challenged the most, the for-profit and the community college sector. Now what does this say? This certainly says that the for-profit and the community college sector has more work to do, but I don't know that this necessarily suggests that 4-year public and 4-year private institutions are somehow off the hook. The demographics across our country would suggest that that is not the case. But there's a second truth that parallels this almost directly, and that is the truth that revenues are constrained on our campuses. Now, there's a whole host of things which are contributing to this revenue constraint. Certainly family income since the Great Recession of 2008 has not grown at the same rate that much of our tuition increases have in colleges and universities. Another complicating factor is less and less federal and state support or community support. None of these things are going to be a surprise to you, but you can see across the nation that this net tuition revenue issue that we face suggests difficult days ahead. But there's something even more important as we look at this revenue constraint that we have, and that is that those colleges and universities that are perceived to be lower rated are challenged even greater than those institutions that might be highly selective or breathe the rare air. Now, I recognize, looking at those of you who are participating, that this won't come as a great surprise, but this data is important because it certainly suggests that those of us who work at institutions that maybe don't enjoy the strongest of reputations have to be even more creative, even more innovative, and hustle faster and quicker in order to ensure enrollment and therefore revenue. So, truth one, enrollment is declining across the country. Truth two, revenue is constrained. Truth three is it's even worse for those of us who don't work at the most selective and most prestigious institutions in the country. But it goes even further because there are so many critiques of higher education that as we think about this stabilization of revenue and enrollment, we've got huge challenges because there are so many criticisms of what's happening within the higher education environment across the country. We think of this book that came out a couple of years ago, Higher Education, How Colleges Are Wasting Our Money and Failing Our Kids. You can see a couple of the quotes that have been pulled out of this particular book. And of course, the one that makes us think is prices got to where they are because both universities and administrators spent like drunken sailors. Does this reflect our reality? No, but it certainly reflects a perception that people have, and it complicates our ability to put together a strategic plan that ensures revenue. Because this perception exists, it makes it a challenge for us both on and off of our campuses to respond. So we'll continue, and we'll think a little bit about not just those headlines, but what else is out there that is making it a challenge for us. Well, perhaps this is a somewhat dated poll, but I think still relevant today, that we have maybe agreement that adults across the country, as well as those of us who work in leadership roles in colleges and universities, believe that there is a crisis in higher education, and this combination of flat revenue as well as the issues that we face in regard to revenue present a great crisis for those of us in higher education. Fewer students, as we've discussed earlier. There are fewer students. The number in the Midwest is particularly troublesome. In fact, at my institution, we're looking at demographics that suggest that we will see declines in the total number of students over the course of the next 9 of 10 years. Now, the fact is, we're not in the worst position across this country. There are other regions of the country, like the New England states and the Middle Atlantic states, where it is even more sober when we think about those actual enrollment projections. Here you can see a chart that is provided that gives you a sense of where the regions are most impacted and where you see some growth. You see a little bit of growth in the South, but in most other regions it's either flatlined or declining. But we also have this trust factor that is working against us. And I would argue that this trust factor is not only in the public, but perhaps on our campuses as well, where we have an increasing number of people who have bought into the idea that higher education is a commodity, or you see some public figures suggesting that a college education is not necessary and does not really serve a purpose. You have people who are thinking that we're not worth the money. This impacts our ability to command the revenue that we need if people don't think what we do is worth it. So how do we combat that, I think, is a question that we will need to contemplate and discuss today. We also have some very interesting information from Jon Lawler, who put this together based on the Sallie Mae How America Pays for College chart, through which I just had a little issue here with the slides. I apologize. I'll get back to where I was. That suggests when a student has eliminated a college before, when they've eliminated a college due to the cost. And what you see, the largest part of this pie chart is before researching the college. So those colleges that are expensive, like my institution, which costs $51,000 a year, is a challenge because students are eliminating that based on the price rather than the actual net cost. So this whole idea of eliminating the college before the research itself is a challenge that many of us face, and some of the participants on this webcast, I think, would also face this particular challenge. How do you combat that in order to capture the revenue that you need at your institution, and how do you develop a plan to do that? Further complicating aspect is that families, and we all know this, are saving less and less for college. They just do not have the wherewithal to put aside money for college. And this, of course, impacts the revenue that we may or may not be able to generate at our institution. So how do you develop a plan that is responsive to this? This is a question that we need to be contemplating. And of course, debt. We all read these stories about debt and the amount of debt that is associated with going to college and how that impacts students' decision and their ultimate enrollment. In fact, one of the things that we're seeing increasing right now is this new phenomenon of summer melt, where qualified intending students, when it comes to the final day to enroll, are just simply opting out of attending college. And I think that that's having some impact on overall enrollment patterns. But some of this has been traced to either a lack of sophistication relative to fiscal literacy, but also the aversion to debt. So debt is a real issue that we face. So the questions that we really need to contemplate currently have to do with, have we reached a tipping point as we think about college affordability and how that relates to revenue, declining or shrinking enrollments, and then ultimately your strategic planning. We've got all of these things happening simultaneously. Shifting demographics, the decreased purchasing price of federal aid, so that's the Pell Grant or the direct loan or SEOG or Perkins. Colleges and universities are spending more and more on financial aid to attract the right students and maintain enrollment. Is that sustainable over the long run? Can families actually afford, or are they more likely, the question, are they willing to continue to borrow for something that they feel maybe is not worth what it once was? And then we've got this complicating factor of colleges continuing to increase their costs, even though we've not seen an economy across the country which suggests that it is possible for families to keep up with those increasing costs. So have we reached a tipping point? And if we have reached a tipping point, what are the potential solutions, or what is out there? Well, you may be aware that there are some, including Bain & Company, as well as some others out there, that think that it is very possible that we could see an increasing number of colleges that close because of this environment that we face. Of course, we've all probably been following the story of the institution, the private institution Indiana, which has just recently announced its closure. I think that probably all of us, participants included, are thinking about what are the responses to these conditions so that we're not one of these 1/3 of colleges that might be on the path to extinction. What can we do? I have to say personally, I think that Bain and company significantly overstates this idea that 1/3 of the colleges in the United States are likely to close. But it is illustrative and it's helpful for us to at least be aware that there are many colleges that either lack the resolve or the creativity to put themselves on a path towards sustainability. So we are likely to see more colleges close if they are not paying attention to the right signs and signals, listening to the implications, and then taking action. So really, are we moving into survival mode? Is this conversation about maintaining enrollment and revenue really about being in survival mode? I think it probably is at some level. I know that in my role and in the discussions that we have at my campus or on my campus as senior leaders or with our board of trustees, we are constantly talking about path to sustainability. How do we survive given all of the sober challenges that we face as an institution and really as a sector? So what does survival mode look like, and what will we do? Now, what's really interesting to me is there really is a bit of a mixed look as we think about higher education, and I would talk specifically about my sector, and that is private independent schools right now. Moodys' most recent report that came out this fall really suggests sort of a mixed outlook, and if we look across sectors, perhaps with the exception of the for-profit sector, there's a lot of mixed messages that are out there. There certainly is a sense from Moodys, one of the rating agencies, that operating performance is fairly stable, meaning perhaps that colleges and universities are taking steps on their campuses in order to remain stable. That might mean a combination of cuts or robust fundraising combined with stable enrollments. But you do see that this idea of net tuition revenue being constrained is one of the observations that Moodys provides, at least for my sector. Again, sector-wide enrollment overall will decline, but some will face these material declines, and those are the institutions that are in trouble and need to look at the implications of these trends and respond appropriately. And that will be, I think, a question for so many of us moving forward. Again, Moodys reinforces that wealthier colleges, those places that perhaps breathe the rare air, they are in much better position than any of us, and will continue to perform in a way that is very different than the rest of us. But I do want to reinforce that even though that was specific to the sector in which I operate, across the entire spectrum, from open access to moderately selective to highly selective students, we all may have different challenges, but all of these challenges result in higher costs and that restraint of revenue that we face. This is an interesting slide that is provided by the Education Advisory Board, and based on the diversity of the group that is participating in this webcast, you might see yourself in this. and understand that even if you work at an open access institution, your path is not necessarily the only path that presents challenges. You can look at the highly selective institutions and recognize that they are facing challenges too, whether it's related to the gross revenues being less because of high and increasing tuition discounting, or the need to expand their recruitment pool. We all have challenges, and we all have to respond, and how quickly and how well we respond is going to be much of what either makes or breaks our institutions in the coming years. So here are the trends that none of us can escape, and also some truth that none of us can escape, regardless of what sector we're in. And I want to pause on this slide for just a moment, because as you begin to think about planning and think about sustaining revenue, these three trends that I'm going to talk about first, this is around what you should be building your plan. So we all, whether we work in an open access institution, a moderately selective institution, or a highly selective institution, really have three things that we need to do. We need to get students here to our campuses. We need to get students through to graduation or completion or program completion. And then we need to get students placed. Those three trends, or those three aspects of our mission, really don't change. But we need to have plans around each one of those areas that helps us ensure stable enrollment and therefore stable revenue. And I don't know that we always break things down into such simple terms. When we talk on my campus about what we need to do, we talk consistently about getting students here, getting students through, and getting students placed. That we can get caught up in all sorts of jargon and lingo about what we do and how we transform lives, and the importance of our general education program and the capstone. But the fact is that part of our business model is getting students here, getting students through, and getting students placed, and doing so in the most efficient way possible, while ensuring that they have all of those great outcomes. So when you begin to start to think about your strategic plan and your strategic planning process, think about those trends and how you can potentially impact those trends, because those are realities that we all face. So there are also some really important truths that we have to come to terms with. And those five truths are consistent across all types of institutions. One, we are all more tuition dependent than ever before. The public subsidies to publicly supported institutions are not what they once were, and an increasing cost burden has been shifted to the families, and therefore is paid through tuition. So we are all tuition dependent, regardless of our sector. Second, in part because of this critique from the media and from the press and the loss of faith that people have in our institutions, we all face more price and cost resistance than ever before. That's just a reality. There's no one, and there's no institution, there's no particular sector where people are just saying, that's a bargain, I'm going there. Everybody, in fact, Robert Reich, a former Secretary of the Treasury under Bill Clinton, wrote a book, and in one chapter he refers to the age of the terrific deal, and that we now as a country are always looking for a deal, and that has sort of manifested itself in higher education in this price and cost resistance that we all face regardless of our institution. And that's not only willingness to pay, but it does have a lot to do with ability to pay, and I don't want to minimize that aspect. that we have more first-generation college-bound students. We have students who don't have the support network and support framework at home. But a reality is that price and cost resistance is informing behavior, and it's a truth that we can't escape from. A third thing, outcomes above all else. The introduction of the college scorecard by the Obama administration's Department of Education has highlighted and has emphasized the importance of outcomes, whether those are retention rates or their graduation rates or degree completion rates. Outcomes have become more important and have become a determinant of quality or a marker of quality and concern, and our families and the marketplace is paying attention to those outcomes, not only when it comes to college choice and college decisions, but also as it comes to allocations of resources, in particular for public institutions. So this is a truth that we can't run away from and needs to be embraced as part of our planning process. We also all face the truth that we have high fixed costs. Let's just be as honest as we can be. We have high cost physical plants unless we are a completely distributed institution, which I don't think that any of the participants on this webcast are. We have high fixed costs in our buildings and our resources, but we also have high fixed costs in our human resources. We work in a high-tech, high-touch market, and therefore we have high fixed costs that don't always allow for the efficiency that we may need as we move forward. And then the final truth that we all face, regardless of sector, are the marketing challenges. And what are those marketing challenges? Well, there is more noise in the marketplace than ever before, whether it's a lead generation campaign, whether it's advertising, whether it's seeing an institution advertising at a professional baseball game. The market is not be well known across our. So lots of things that we have in common, no matter what sector we operate in. And this is important for us to understand, because you can't, as you're beginning to create a strategic plan that will sustain revenue, sustain your institution, you can't view yourself as unique, that you've got a unique set of challenges that you can never overcome, that your sector, your institution, your type of institution is labored so much that you can't get beyond it. This is really about acknowledging that the worries are all the same regardless of the institution where you work. So knowing all of this, knowing all of these trends, and in just a moment, we will take a 30-minute break before I move into the implications and actions that we need to be thinking about as we put together our planning and revenue. So all of this that I've talked about, from declining enrollment to declining revenue, to the media being mad at us, to families having lost trust in us, to understanding that we've got high fixed costs, and so on and so forth, this is what I see planning. There are very few colleges have a plan in place to strategically decrease enrollment. You just don't find places that say, hey, yeah, we want to get smaller, and we want to spend less, and we want to do less. It's hard to find examples of that. And we see very few colleges that have systematic or plans in place to decrease the expense structure for their institution. Now, some might argue that colleges have been doing this over the last 2 decades in moving to more contingent faculty, and yes, there's no question about that. That's been about expense control. But a systematic, proactive plan to actually decrease the expense structure. What I'm really talking about is not the expense structure to the college, but the expense structure to the student. We see very little of that. I know of very few institutions that are actually thinking about or contemplating reducing the scope of what they try to do and changing or redirecting their mission. Perhaps some examples of where that's happened. You may have read earlier this week in Inside Higher Ed about the potential of some consolidation of public universities in Pennsylvania, and perhaps Georgia is the best example where there has been some consolidation, which did represent a reduction of scope or mission. But very few institutions are contemplating those types of dramatic moves. Instead, we see, and I'm sure on your campuses it's the same thing, we all want miracles. And we all want to continue to do everything. We want it all. We want to be all things for all people. And that is tough work. And that's why if we're going to continue to do that, we have to be super smart. We have to understand the implications of what's happening in the marketplace. And then we need to be straightforward and direct about what we need to do for our institution to remain healthy. And what are the planning recommendations that you could contemplate? And will you have the political will to make difficult decisions as you think about planning to sustain enrollment and revenue? Again, before we take the 30-second break, I think that that's a question that I want all of you to be contemplating. Making difficult decisions in order to maintain revenue and enrollment is not always easy. Sometimes it's about closing departments or reducing the number of faculty in a particular department in order to invest in an area that is growing. This is one of the things that you'll have to begin to think about in trade-offs. And at my institution, we've had lots of these conversations, which I'll weave through our conversation in the coming minutes. But for now, I've been asked to provide everybody with a 30-second stretch. We will take 30 seconds. People can stand up and take a quick stretch break, grab a sip of water, and then we will return as I'll discuss some of the implications and actions that I would recommend we take as we think about sustaining enrollment and revenue. So we'll start the 30-second break right now. Thank you, everybody, and I hope everybody had a chance to grab a quick stretch and a sip of water. We'll continue, and I do want to remind you once again that I invite any questions throughout that you might have. You're welcome to ask those questions in the question or comment box, and we will address those. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about what do you do in light of all of this information and what's happening? What are the implications of these trends and the information that I've shared? And what does it mean? What are the actions that colleges may be able to take in order to sustain enrollment and revenue? I want to start with this great quote, and I'm not really concerned about what you may or may not think of Rupert Murdoch, but I think there is some wisdom for us in the higher education marketplace behind this quote. that the world is changing very fast, and big will not beat small anymore. It will be the fast beating the slow. Just think a little bit about that particular quote, the fast beating the slow. For me, there's a little bit of terror as I think about that, given the way we frequently work in higher education and our embrace of shared governance, and the fact that sometimes we move at a glacial pace. The reality is, as we contemplate these trends, which I've discussed in the first portion of this webcast, it will be those institutions that can act fast that will beat, or that will be in a better position than those institutions that continue to operate slowly. I guess one of the things that I might say is something that we talk about on our campus is that sometimes perfection is the enemy of good. And I think that also reflects Murdoch's comments. Another great innovator, Steve Jobs, innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. We are entering a time where colleges and universities are going to need to have an innovation strategy and an innovation mindset in place in order to be the fast beating the slow, and in order to respond in a proactive way to these trends, these downward trends that we face. So I think that one of the first steps that you have to take on your campus in planning to sustain revenue and enrollment is to contemplate and to think about, what is our approach to innovation going to be? What are the things that we're going to do? And I love this 5-step innovation strategy formula. Try lots of stuff, see what works, heavy up on what works, quickly kill stuff that doesn't work, and repeat and repeat. This is not something that comes naturally on a college campus. But I think that we see plenty of examples of colleges and universities that are introducing new programs, whether they're academic or they're co-curricular or they're student support, that represent this formula. And I think that one of the first steps you have to take on your campus is to define, what will our innovation strategy be? Because if we try to just continue with the status quo, we will become smaller institutions with less revenue. We've got to begin to think outside of the box, and those places that do begin to think outside of the box quickly and have an innovation strategy formula are those that are more likely to be successful. Now, so many of us are trying to do the exact same things, particularly when it comes to getting students here. Again, going back to one of those truths that we all face, we all have the same challenge of getting students here. You are sort of focusing on all of the same populations. We're all focusing on all of the same populations. But is there a way that you can do it in a different way? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. But I do think that as we think about innovation and we think about an innovation strategy and think about responding, we have to ask ourselves this central question. Or we have to come to terms with the idea that we can't really afford what we've become. Whether that has to do with the infrastructure that we've built, whether it has to do with the breadth of programs that we offer, whether it has to do with the benefit we provide to our employees, we have to come to terms as we think about stabilizing revenue and enrollment that we probably all can't afford what we've become. We mentioned earlier that we're all tuition dependent now, and that makes a big difference, and there just aren't those dollars. In fact, we can see again here another grid of how much tuition revenue has slowed across the country as we have become less and less affordable. So what are the implications of coming to terms with the fact that we can't really afford what we've become? Well, there are some realities that have to be a part of the innovation formula on your campus, on all of our campuses. One of the realities is that there needs to be a full and complete exploration of cost restraint or cuts. There is no question about the fact that we are going to need to likely find areas in which we can cut. That is going to be important. I think that we will continue to see more discussion. We should see more discussion of the potential for consolidation. As we all contemplate the fact that we can't really afford what we've become, we will need to imagine new models and consolidation. So, for example, can we all continue to pay top dollar for senior leadership at our institutions, or is there a more centralized model? Another implication of this idea that we cannot afford what we've become is refocusing or changing the mission. We see some good examples of this across the country, where some colleges and universities have embraced a focus perhaps on allied health sciences or the environment, where colleges have said, we're not going to try to be all things to all people because we recognize the challenges of a crowded marketplace. We understand we can't do everything well. Is there a way that we can focus our mission or change our mission in order to be relevant? There will be more discussion and more contemplation of outsourcing services. And I don't just mean food services and facilities, but perhaps it's tutoring, perhaps it's retention programming. This outsourcing of services will be directly related to needing to reduce the overall footprint of the human resources and the cost of human resources on a particular campus. Recognize that this is never popular. It's never something that an institution wants to do, but it will be important as we all come to terms with the fact that we really can't afford what we've become. Now, one of the things that we also need to understand is that if we don't act fast, the haves will benefit greatly at the expense of the have-nots who don't have a plan. So what are the things that you might think about for some planning recommendations as you're contemplating this particular area of the fact that we can't all afford what we've become? Well, first and foremost, an examination of the core expense structure, and then making fiscally responsible decisions about where to cut, but also where to invest. I think that this is an area that we sometimes avoid, is to do a full examination of our core expense structure on our campus. My particular campus has gone through this exercise. In part, we are going through a change of our curriculum. We're moving from a 3 10-week term calendar to 2 14-week semesters, and have had to examine every cost associated with the delivery of our educational program. It's brought up lots of questions about where we invest and where we make recommendation. Contemplating an exploration of the core expense structure is something that's really important and can help you craft the plan towards financial and revenue sustainability. Second thing that you might think about doing, introducing lean management principles on your campus. A couple of years ago, we hired a part-time lean management expert to help contemplate areas in which we could save resources or we could improve job performance. And this has been very savvy, as well as has had a great return on it and has helped us reduce some of our core costs because we've contemplated this and we've gone through this process. Now, cutting those core costs has allowed us to invest in other things that have helped us ultimately attract the necessary revenue in order to join or establish a collaborative or a co-op. There are a couple of really great models. There's the Ohio 5. There are 5 colleges and universities that have a partnership and they have joint purchasing and joint delivery of courses and some services. And if you want to be on the leading edge, you want to be one of the quick rather than the slow, be a lead in trying to bring a group of institutions together that might allow you through a cooperative or a collaborative to reduce some of your expense structure. And then finally, for a planning recommendation, it's very important to have clear goals about expense reduction. When there is a need to reduce expense or make cuts, people need to be held accountable, and there need to be very clear goals. I will say, again, personal experience, we've not always been as clear about goals and accountability when it's come to expense structure reduction, and as a result, sometimes you don't have the opportunity to celebrate a great victory because the goals have not been as clear as they need to be. I want to mention on this particular slide and how important this whole examination of can we afford what we've become. In the state of Illinois, where the legislature still does not have a budget, we're going on 2 years without a budget. Institution alone is on the hook for $3.2 million of MAP grants, which have been, that's a financial aid program for needy students from Illinois that have been promised to students. We've had to establish clear expectations about expense reduction to that amount in order to continue to deliver a high quality program, but also not run deficits. So the idea of clear goals is very, very important. A second thing that I want to talk about as you think about planning and you think about enrollment and revenue is that the demographic changes that we face should result in campuses taking a much more strategic focus to their enrollment planning. That whole idea of getting students here as well as getting students through. So I think that these demographic changes will bring heightened attention to enrollment planning. Sorry, a little bit of this slide is cut off, as you can see on your screen, but this is a really interesting slide and grid that I think we all should take seriously as we think about the demographic changes. This was put out by Noel Levitz, and they indicate that these are the 4 activities that a college should be engaged in as we contemplate these declines in enrollment and therefore declines in revenue. We should be focused on 4 different areas: market penetration, which of course means going deeper into a core market where you already have a good presence. How do you get more of your fair share within that market? Yes, I would describe that. And that may have a lot to do with recruitment strategies. Second is program development. That is new programs, new majors, new activities, new sports, new services. There needs to be some constant exploration as part of your innovation strategy of product development and new programs. Diversification. We oftentimes are pushed or asked to contemplate online distribution or expansion of summer camps or expansion of facilities revenue. How do you diversify your revenue streams in a responsible way? And then new markets, market development. I can tell you that in our most recent strategic planning process at Augustana, this grid was front and center to our process as we contemplated how do we ensure that we maintain enrollment and maintain revenue. What do we have to do and what's the right balance within these things. Now, for us, we chose to focus on 3 of these 4. Meaning instruction online or anything like that. But we've certainly introduced new programs, athletic as well as academic. We've gone into new markets, so market development, including putting a new admissions officer in California and expanding our international recruitment. And then market penetration, we actually located 2 regional reps. We're about 3 hours from Chicago. Chicago and the 7 collar counties most important recruit territory, and we allow contemplating, what do I do? Where do we begin? And starting to list in order to maintain, sustain enrollment and revenue. Harry Truman, one of the presidents I admire, my father really admired him. Quote here, "Carry the battle to them, don't let them bring it to you. Put them on the defensive and don't ever apologize for anything." I think that this is an apropos quote to the idea of new program development. Sometimes we get a little shy. Sometimes we get a little concerned that, well, somebody else has that program, they have a winning team, we don't want to get into that marketplace, we can't do that. And I think we have to have a can-do, but not only a can-do better attitude as we think about sustaining our own enrollments and revenue. So here are some thoughts for some planning recommendations as you think about sustaining enrollment and revenue. One, what are academic programs that you can add that will attract new students but have low startup costs? You know, sometimes we look at the report provided by the College Board and we say, okay, here are the trends. Oh, wow, look, there are all sorts of students who are going into engineering. And let's add an engineering program, and then we explore the costs, and we say, gosh, we could never afford to do that. So what are our academic programs that you can add that will attract new students but have low startup costs? Is there a way to co-deliver a program? Are there existing instructors in your particular area that can help you keep the cost of education or a program addition down without having to hire new full-time faculty members? In the time that I've been here, and I've been at August since 2005, this is my 12th year, we've introduced nearly 10 academic programs, and we've always looked for some connection to our existing program, and then how that looked to attract new students, students who wouldn't choose Augustana otherwise, and how do we ultimately build in the startup costs, what's our return on investment, how quickly will we get that back? And we've seen some terrific success in this area when we have aligned those new academic program additions with an existing program. A couple of examples, we added graphic design. It really has helped save our studio art program because we could use instructors who were tenured who could help with the graphic design instruction, and it's saved a major and saved several programs. The same is true of our multimedia journalism program, which was an addition to our communication studies program. We will be adding in the fall of 2019 our first master's degree program in some time in speech and language pathology. So what are academic programs that represent a good return on investment for you? And when you're thinking about that, are you really thinking about return on investment? Now, I'll also say that we added an anthropology major, and we did that because it was the interest of the faculty. There wasn't a full study done, and that probably was not the most strategic ad. We did that 10 years ago. But when you're thinking about program additions, thinking critically about the return on investment, and how will it attract new students? Second is adding athletic or co-curricular programs that will attract new students but have low startup costs. We've done this very successfully in the time that I've been here. We've added 4 different athletic programs. I'll mention Albion College, another private institution in Michigan, has added countless athletic programs in order to get students to a campus. It really, for us, has been low startup costs to do this, but it's attracted students. They have a reason to come here. They populate our business administration and our English and our communication sciences and disorders and our education majors. That they help build enrollment and sustain revenue. Identify programs that you can offer to partners. Is there a revenue stream out there because of either a co-curricular or an academic program that you can offer to another institution? Is there a revenue possibility that helps you make sure that all of your human resources are being used effectively? The fourth thing is to identify programs that will build prospective student affinity. What are things that prospective students can get really excited about? Is it theater? Is it choir? Is it marching band? All of those things I think are really important. And then the final planning recommendation, which maybe isn't a planning recommendation, but is just a reality that we have to contemplate in doing strategic planning that is focused on enrollment, is we have to take a deep breath. We have to brace ourselves, and we have to ask this really important question, and that is, are students buying what we're selling? And if we find out that they are not buying what we're selling, how do we act quickly and strategically in order to reshape those views or that program or that department so that they are buying what we're selling? Now, this has to be done in an authentic way, but if we just hold out hope that there's going to be a resurgence of students studying German as a major, that is not a winning strategy. That is not a strategy that's going to allow us to attract more students and therefore more revenue. So we have to ask ourselves the question, are we selling what students are buying? And we have to be prepared for the answers and have to be prepared to plan accordingly. A third thing that I want to talk about is that whether you're an open access or a moderately selective or a very selective institution, it is, I think, without question that alternative selection criteria are likely to become the norm for the student acquisition process, the admissions process. We've seen Goucher College was the first in the nation to launch a video application alternative where a student can submit a video in place of some of the traditional things that you see in an application. At Bennington College, they could curate an application. We, of course, see more and more places that have test optional admission or self-reported information used in the admissions and the selection process. I'm just going to be candid. Why are colleges doing this? It's because they have come to terms with the student acquisition process is the most important thing that you can do strategically, and they want to eliminate as many barriers as possible to the application process in order to ultimately enroll students. It's very transparent. I mean, there are lots of good reasons, good philosophical reasons to do this, but there's also just simply the transparency of the focus on student acquisition. So what are the implications? For some families, the process will become even more confusing. They won't understand why at the large public university they can apply with all self-reported information, yet at the regional private institution they've got to submit 2 letters of recommendation and an essay and have their test scores sent from a testing agency. That's a problem, and that's something that we're all going to have to guard against and make sure that we don't confuse families further. Probably more of an internal challenge and an implication is that these new ways of applying will create considerable confusion on our campuses about quality. Are these students qualified? Are they ready? And that's something that in your planning you'll need a little bit about. We've been test optional at Augustana since 2008. And we asked our entire faculty for a vote on our test optional policy because we wanted to have full buy-in, and spent about 18 months socializing our policy because we didn't want there to be questions about quality. We already are seeing this third implication, that standardized test makers are reinventing their to try to remain relevant. There is a challenge of advising students may become more problematic, and there will be lots of reform of the admissions process. So what can you be doing? Well, re-examine your application process and simplify it where possible to eliminate barriers. Again, keeping student acquisition in mind. Do what works best for you, rather than those things that you think position you in a particular way, or those things which traditional markers of quality might have suggested were important. You've got to do what works best for you. If you're a place that requires standardized test performance now, consider being test optional. More than 50 of the top 100 national liberal arts colleges all invite students to apply for admission without the submission of their standardized test scores. We all could be doing more of that. Or consider providing the student an opportunity to provide self-reported information. There are a lot of studies out there that suggest that self-reported information is just as good as other information that is provided, so I think that is something that is also worth contemplating, and then of course make it convenient and straightforward to apply. I'll go quickly through this one because it hits close to home. The VP for Enrollment will continue to be in the hot seat as we think about revenue and we think about enrollment. I consider my job as the Chief Enrollment Officer, I'm also the Chief Revenue Officer. It's my job to make sure that we've got sufficient revenue to ensure that the people who work at Augustana get a paycheck and get a raise. And that is not only a difficult position, but it's also the hot seat. And there's lots of information here, but what we will see if we don't take proper actions is we're going to see tremendous churn in leadership. And that in and of itself has a tremendous impact on enrollment and revenue stability. If you're constantly turning over your enrollment team or enrollment officer, that's not good, that's not healthy for revenue stabilization or for enrollment stabilization. I think we are likely to see more and more enrollment leaders stay where they are if they're in a good position because it's high risk to leave. We'll also see a lot of inexperienced leaders in enrollment positions, and you may be seeing that at your institutions right now. I'll just focus on the final two things. Consultants are going to benefit greatly. Colleges are going to be spending more and more on consultants to help with the student acquisition process. And unfortunately, I think the ethics of college admissions may suffer considerably as we contemplate that hot seat. Here's the thing I think we need to be thinking about when we think about enrollment leaders. Not losing sleep at night over the potential of failure, not even being able to spell the word, but what are the planning recommendations? First, an enrollment manager needs to have the necessary tools and sandbox in order to be successful. Having a clear understanding of the tools that are available to enrollment managers at successful institutions is really important. And I think that something that sometimes we overlook. We look at our own internal structure and say, well, that's what the enrollment guy has always had or enrollment leader has always had, and we ought to keep it that same way. I think we have to take a bigger view of this. And I think that we're likely to see enrollment managers having responsible functions that are core to those three things that we all have before us as challenges, and that's getting students here, getting students through, and getting students placed. In fact, there are some models where enrollment managers have admissions and they have retention and they actually have career services because of the accountability and need. I'd also say that in your planning recommendations, if you've got a good one, keep them there as much as you can. And before you launch some new program, make sure you're involved in enrollment management and ensuring that they're listening and helping you listen to the market. Got a couple of final things that I want to share with you, and then certainly welcome the questions that you might have. We've talked a little bit about career services and outcomes, and that they will become as important as financial aid, location, and major in the college choice. I don't think that there's any question about that. It's a lot of data that suggests that that is implications for our institutions, and these implications in action really deliver or relate to a plan. We're all going to need to make a greater investment in career counseling and career coaches, whether it's a 2-year institution or a 4-year institution. That outcome investment is going to be more important than ever before. Regrettably, circles, this may result in more administrators, and I know that that's oftentimes under, but the emphasis on outcomes means that we're going to need to make some investment or put people in positions where they can be career coaches and career counselors. There is going to be, without question, more a need to emphasize career preparation in the admissions office and in the student acquisition process. And I tend to believe, and I'm certainly work with prospective students and family, that I have fewer students who are asking, can I get in? It's, will I get the job that I want at the end of 4 years? And will I be making any money? These are some pretty serious implications that we need to be prepared for. So here are the planning recommendations as you're thinking about sustaining revenue and enrollment. You've got to have a sound plan in these areas. Got to get serious about tracking data and sharing placement data. This is the new norm for demonstrating your institution's value to a family. Second, having clear academic and core learning efforts and career placement outcomes. I mean, having those front and center everywhere. I visit a lot of college campuses, and I'm impressed by how much I see on bulletin boards and websites that are contemplating and that are emphasizing career placement goals. Think about professional career coaches. Think of it sort of as a reverse admissions office with career counselors who are assigned to current students and work with them in the junior and senior year to make sure that they have the right placement at the end. A couple of last things. Making the class, just that whole idea of sustaining enrollment won't be enough anymore. Just being able to claim that we're at 2,500 students again, and the reason it won't be enough is because of the revenue pressure and the declining revenue that we see. And part of that is because just this enrollment means that we're unlikely to get the same students that we have been receiving, and there's more of a cost structure to serving those students that we will be enrolling in the coming years. So a couple of data points that you need to be aware of, and I think that this also, how are you going to support the students who you ultimately will enroll if you have a good plan to get students there, what's your plan to get them through? We can see that the percentage of students that meet all of the college readiness benchmarks decline. This is troubling. We can see that an increasing number of students are taking remedial courses, and you can see that, of course, the change demographically suggests that this is only going to increase. So a reality is of just making the class, given the growth segments of the population, there is the potential that there is going to be a shifting need to support students in a very, very different way. And they are likely to come with more needs, and as a result, we're going to need to have more support services in place. So the implications of the changing mix of students, even if you're able to sustain enrollment, is that you're going to need to offer more support services. There's likely going to be a higher cost to keep a student. There's going to need to be more learning specialists, whether it's English language learners or learning support or reading and writing or financial literacy. Again, the potential that you may need more administrators or refocused administrators, and we'll need to be thinking about the importance of these areas in recruitment messaging. So what are the planning recommendations? Any strategic plan that doesn't focus on written and persistence efforts on your campus is not a plan that helps you be sustainable into the future. Retaining and maintaining and re-recruiting those students who are already on your campus is job number one. Having a good understanding of the data that you have on your campus and how to serve the populations that are most at risk, I think is very, very important. It's something that we've spent a lot of time on. In the several years that I've been here, we've raised our first to second year retention rate by about 6 points by focusing on these things. And I want to be very, very clear that retention and persistence is about stabilizing revenue. In fact, oftentimes it's an easier path forward than recruitment to new market. It's just simply figuring out who you need to support and retaining those students. I also always recommend in talking about retention and retention focus is re-examining financial aid policies that may make it difficult for students to remain at your institution. There are also going to be new numbers that will become the focus in financial aid, and this is really important as we think about revenue also. We all know that the tuition discount across all sectors, this is unfunded financial aid, is increasing. Some people would say it's an unsustainable rate. That is probably true. That is probably accurate. But right now, colleges and universities need to offer this amount of financial aid to maintain their enrollment. But I think that there is likely to be less emphasis on discount rate, or the institutions that are in the best position will focus less on discount rate. Instead, they will be looking at total revenue. And again, this is going to be something that a lot of people are going to hate because discount rate has sort of become the... In fact, I have a theory that when new presidents go to Harvard for the new president's school, they spend one day of 2 weeks talking about how to get along with the board of trustees and the faculty on your campus, and then the other 13 days talking about the evils of the discount rate. But I am convinced that discount rate is going to mean less and less because total revenue is going to carry. Do you have enough revenues associated with tuition, with room and board, with all of those other fees that allow you to sustain your operation? Some of the traditional profile markers may become less relevant too as revenues become the focus. Do we have some room to have a couple of points loss in either GPA or standardized tests and not demonstrably change the quality of student on our campus in order to generate greater revenue? There's a high probability colleges and universities will move to a model of meeting 100% of demonstrated financial need as a quality of focus. But again, the new numbers are going to be retention and graduation rates. That's going to be the focus. One final thing that I think should go into a planning on your campuses is this whole idea of price and net price and the experimentation. There is no doubt in my mind that we will continue to see significant experimentation with price and net price. We are likely to see more tuition resets. We may see some attempts at real pricing like Saturn or JCPenney's failed model. We may even see some institutions price for an add-on. Rather than have sort of all-inclusive model of a comprehensive fee, there may be more a la carte. And there may be some colleges that introduce year-round enrollment in order to not only maintain revenues, but also move students to a graduation within 3 years. So there are likely to be some new pricing models, but I don't know that there is going to be a particular model that emerges. But here are some recommendations relative to price and modeling. I think that we all have to dissect the business model. I apologize for that typographical error, but dissect your business model to understand exactly what it is. How do you get your revenue? From whom does it come? Elements. Sometimes I get my hand slapped at my own institution when I say we're really in the hospitality industry. When I look at our enrollment, since we discount tuition through merit-based scholarships and need-based financial aid, but we don't discount any room or board. Room and board is where we see considerable growth in revenue. So understand your business model and be able to articulate it and know what really matters. I mean, who are your revenue drivers on campus? Model options that enable enrollment and revenue growth. You know, what would you have to do at your institution? If you reduced your price and your net price, would it help you expand enrollment, and would that wash result in more revenue? This is one of the things that we do with our international population. Heavy discount, but the volume that we're able to enroll allows us in order to sustain ourselves. So some really good things that you can consider for recommendations and action relative to this. So I want to just close with a couple of final thoughts, and then I want to take any of your questions that George may have received, and George may have some questions also. So Bob Zemsky is from the University of Pennsylvania, one of the real thought leaders in higher education. And once upon a time he said that colleges and universities need to be mission-driven and market-smart. I love sort of that emphasis of mission-driven and market-smart. But not long after that, Bob really sort of saw the writing on the wall and talked about the need for colleges to be market-smart and mission-driven. But our reality is, for most of us, those included as well as Augustana, the institution that I represent, is that if we have no market, we have no mission. And as a result, we've got to get smart about our planning, and we've got to make sure our planning is shaped around student acquisition, getting students here, getting students through, and getting students placed in what they're most ambitious and most interested in. So I'll just close with a couple of takeaways and then open it up to any questions that people might have. Any plan that is focused on revenue and students, job number one is student acquisition. Second thing, retention, because retention is increased dollar signs. Fiscally responsible decision making must include addressing your cost structure. I hate to use the words cuts, but we've got to examine where we spend our money and then make good decisions. Value today is really about great outcomes. This is a key driver for student acquisition as well as retention. If they can see that you're delivering great results and you're highlighting those great results, they're more likely to come, to stay, and ultimately graduate. And the final thing, as you're putting together plans to stabilize enrollment and revenue, trying lots of stuff, failing fast, I think is helpful. And the reality of all of this is that those institutions that are going to remain and that are nimble will stabilize their enrollment and revenue. So those are some takeaways that I wanted to share with you, and I think I will pause right now and I'll turn it back over to George.
Okay, thanks, Ken. That concludes the formal part of our presentation. Thank you, Ken, for sharing insights and experiences on this very important topic. At this time, we'd like to give our audience the opportunity to ask any questions or share their own thoughts. Once again, let me remind you that you can call or write in with questions to our presenter. To write in, please click in the chat bubble in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, and feel free to write a question or comment to our presenter. In addition, if you are listening through your phone and would like to call in live with a question during our Q&A session, you simply need to press *1 on a touch-tone phone, and you'll be placed into a call queue. It's time to ask your question live. To you.
I think the trend that I probably most sleep over is the shifts in demography. It's not only a question of the fact that we have fewer students, traditional students, who are going to be entering college, but that mix is different. And I'm just not confident that all of our colleges and universities have adjusted to the needs of the students who we will be encountering. And it will take us some time to exciting that we're going to have populations to serve, but there are troublications as well about the level of support, about the financial background that some students will have, and what that means to our ability to deliver on our mission.
Okay, great. Do you think the Trump administration, speech related to higher education, will have an impact on the trends that you've discussed and the possible solutions for higher education?
Yeah, great question. I think that we have to watch very closely what happens at the Department of Education and in the White House, as well as in the House of Representatives. We've heard about the potential changes to the Pell Grant, which would be disastrous, I think, for higher education, given all of the trends that we're seeing relative to students entering the higher education. I think that that's something that we have to be very, very prepared to an all-out assault if there are significant changes considered there. And I also remain concerned about the travel ban and the impact on perception, quality, and the nature of higher education in the United States. So those are a couple of things that I'm concerned about. There has been some question about whether or not there will be a reintroduction of the for-profit market. I just don't know that will happen. But I think with the Trump administration, I think we have to be pretty cautious right now and concerned about, first and foremost, the Pell Grant and Pell Grant support, and then also whether or not we see a declining number of international students who are enthusiastic coming to the United States. We've looked at the demographic trends in the U.S. have shifted our focus for student acquisition, at least in part, to international markets. And that's been a part of the enrollment and revenue stability plan at my institution and at many institutions. And if we see a 10% drop in international enrollment, that's going to spell disaster for a lot of institutions. So we're contemplating right now, okay, what happens? Is there another market that we can quickly move into in order to make up for that 10% drop if that happens? So I think there are some things that we're going to have to be very cautious about as we think about the Trump administration.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
And folks, we are out of time. Just thank you all again for attending today, and please consider joining our Facebook and Twitter communities to be part of our national conversations about higher education. For those listeners who are unable to question or to ask a question in our allotted time, please feel free to email any questions or feedback to info@paper-clip.com, and our panelists will have an opportunity to respond over email. Please also note that the details about how to receive a certificate of completion for today's webcast and some of our upcoming webinars on the last couple of slides. To receive your certificate of completion, you will need the same username and password you used to download your webinar materials for today. You will also receive a CD recording of today's event within the next 7 to 10 business days. That does conclude today's Paperclip Communications webcast. I would like to once again thank Kent for sharing with us today on this important topic. And on behalf of Paperclip Communications, thank you to our audience for joining us today. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and you will join us for future webinars.